everyone could see me. If you... There we go. It took me a little while to get started today, but I am live and let's get started for today. I decided to paint in my... Everyone could see me. If you... I decided to use my Strathmore mixed media sketchbook because I have this background page that I started a little while ago and I want to finish it. So I thought this would be a really good opportunity to paint a little bit and to talk to you about my sketchbook practices and about the different things that I do. If you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat because I will, I'm very happy to answer any questions. These sessions are going to be weekly, and every week we are going to do something a little bit different. So I'm going to either sketch in pencil or pen, or I'll paint, or there's going to be different things, but hopefully always inspiring and fun. So if there's something specific that you would like to do, let me know, because I'm always happy to do that with you. So I'm going to paint in this sketchbook. This is my Strathmore mixed media sketchbook. I have already created this background, so you can see I made a really messy gouache colorful background that I'm now going to paint over. And this is how I like to use this sketchbook. So a bit of a mix between paint and pencils and crayons and markers. These are pages that I've done in the past. And this is a page that I would like to fill today. I already done the page next in my live session in my community yesterday. So I've filled this page and I would like to complete this page as well because I think it's going to be looking wonderful. And I just want to show you how I work in my sketchbook. So on this page, I have created this background layer with gouache, quite roughly. I kept the middle quite light because I want to have a bit of that light sort of shining through the trees. And I'm going to paint some darker trees here at the sides to frame the page and to make that sort of like peep through effect of being in the forest. This is the gouache that I'm using. You can see that it's a bit of a mix of different colors. It's a mix of Winsor and Newton gouache and some schminke as well. And feel free to join in using paint or markers or pencils. I just hope that you find some time to get creative as well. And if you have any questions, please ask away. So there we go, quick sip of tea, quick sip of water. And I have my water to paint with here. So, a palette and my gouache. So keeping it quite simple, not so much mixed media, just lots of fun and loose painting. So before I get started actually on my page, I want to add some color to my palette and mix up the colors that I'm looking for. And I want to create that effect where the colors become more saturated towards the foreground. So the background is a bit more vacant and the foreground is going to be more and more intense in color. So there we go. So I'm going to use mostly blues and greens for this painting today. So I'm mixing up a bit of this dark blue and a bit of light blue here as well. There we go. It's been a little while since I've used this set of gouache that I put in this little palette. The palette is works quite well, so it stops your gouache from drying out. So there we go. And gouache is one of my favorite mediums. It's been a little while since I used it a lot, sort of in my classes and in my sessions, and I want to use it a bit more. So this is a really fun opportunity to show you how I am going to do that. So let's start by adding in some of these trees. And the trick for trees is to not make them too straight, especially for an old forest, which is sort of the look that I want to create today. It is good to make something that is not too straight and that is a little bit irregular and a little bit wonky, because not many trees are perfectly straight. So you can see, there we go. The first strokes are always the most scary. I don't know if you find this as well. That the first brush strokes are always the most difficult, and once you get started, it becomes easier and easier. So, just making sure I have my right reference photo here. So, deep breath. This is my first painting of today. I usually start my day with sketchbooking, but this time I did not, because I had lots of other things to do, and this is my first painting of today. And for those of you who know me, you might know that I paint in quite a lot of different styles. So I like using ink, I like using marker, watercolour, gouache. I also work digital sometimes, although not very often on this channel. And I think there's a lot of benefits to using different mediums, and everything has a place in my heart. All of these are important to me and I enjoy using. So, and like each medium creates its own effects and its own sort of styles. I really like loose art as well. So when people ask me how do I find my art style, I always think this is such an interesting. I get asked this so often on Instagram and on other places, and I think art style is something that people worry about way too much, because your style, like your art style, same as your personal style, is something that develops over time and something that will come out eventually, and that you don't always know yourself. Sometimes other people find it easier to know what your art style is than what you do. And I think people are much too hang up on style, and I know that especially for social media, people really like, or like the algorithm really likes consistency and having like the same look to things. But come on, we're not creating art for the algorithm. We're doing it for ourselves and for joy, and for there's so many different reasons to make art. So as I said, let me know if you have any questions, or put something in the chat. I always love hearing what everyone is up to and what your thoughts are of what we're making. So doing a background, as what I'm doing today, is a really great way of getting rid of that fear of the white page. And you can see I've done that background quite loosely with a big brush, but it makes a huge difference to getting rid of that white paper. White paper can be something really scary, and by adding in a bit of a background color first, you take that away and it becomes much easier to start adding in other things and to start painting the rest of your painting. So I'm using the gouache quite thin at the moment, but one of the reasons I like gouache is that opaque, intense color that you can create within. So, and the paint underneath can always reactivate, so as long as you use like normal water-based gouache, you can buy acrylic gouache as well, which dries which dries waterproof. But normal acrylic gouache is very water soluble. So the layers underneath can always reactivate again when you paint over them. So that's something to keep in mind. Something that you might have to be a little bit careful about. So. See, there we go. So the idea is to make a forest, these trees on the side, and having the light shine in the middle and make it a bit magical, a bit mystical, magical. I have a bit of an idea in mind. So it does really help to have a bit of a vision when you start painting as well. To already have an idea of what it is that you're going to make makes a world of difference, because like if you start painting straight away and you don't know what it is that you want to create, it makes it much harder, because you start making not even mistakes, but sometimes you can start panicking a little bit and then do things that afterwards you're like, oh, why did I do that? So if you make a painting, just close your eyes for a moment and visualize what you're going to make. What is that final look going to be like? Is it a really dense sort of picture with lots of details, or is it something that is quite sort of abstract or wider? One is not necessarily better than the other, but it helps to create a little bit of a vision in your mind's eye, and also to create a bit of a vision. And I absolutely know that sometimes the vision that you have in your mind is not quite achievable yet, because sometimes people's abilities are not quite, their skills are not quite up to the level that they would like to, and then your vision might not really be realistic, but it's okay. It still helps to have a little bit of a plan in mind and a bit of an idea of what it is that you want to go to. So I'm already adding in a few plants here in the background. So I'm working from the large shapes slowly to smaller shapes. So, and how much water you want to use with your paint is very personal, and it's something that you need to find your own sort of balance in as well, because it's easy for me to tell you that you would need to use lots of water or little water, but you can use your gouache in a lot of different ways. So you need to play with it a little bit, find out what it is that you like. Do you enjoy that more wet, sort of more see-through texture, or do you prefer it a bit drier, a bit more opaque? So I would recommend just have a bit of a play with it, see how it reacts, what type of paper you're using as well influences that. So a bit of shadow on this tree. See, there we go. I'm just having a bit of fun with this as well. I can zoom in a little bit more so you can see it. So making sure that I'm sharp, and the idea is that the trees are going to get darker and darker towards the foreground. This is my plan for today. Actually, I want a little bit of white. Do I have some white somewhere? Let me quickly grab that. So this is my box of paints, and I have some white there. White gouache is a really great color when you work with watercolors as well, because gouache is really opaque and it can really help you maybe cover up some areas and create different looks. The white gouache, and also if you mix it with watercolors, you get still that opaque gouache sort of effect that we all like so much. So see how much lighter that is. If you want me to zoom into something a little bit more, let me know. I'm more than happy to do so. The color I'm using here is not white, so I've added some white in it, but I've mixed it up with a little bit of green and blue. Now it looks very white in comparison. So I'm thinking that next week we can practice something, maybe with graphite, slightly different technique. Unless you really want to paint again, let me know. I've run a little poll on Instagram earlier, and people said, "Oh, we'd love to use gouache." So I thought, well, that is fantastic because I already have some gouache that I wanted to use. So there we go. And maybe some more light green here. I always use quite a lot of white when I'm using gouache. So I'm trying to create that depth, that sense of lots of layers of colors and trees happening. And we can add in more detail and make it a bit more precise once we've added in these main shapes. And this picture is inspired by a trip to Devon that I took recently, where I took some photos, and you have these really crackly trees on the outside of the roads there, which is just beautiful. And I decided that I wanted to paint it there. And then the picture on the other side here was also made in Devon, based on the moors there. It's just, there's something with those landscapes that is just so mystical. And I think especially when you come from a country like I am, that is just completely flat and even, those more darker, with all those big stones and those dark stones and all the moss everywhere, is just something that instantly creates that sort of mystical feel. So there could be some bushes here. So you can see I'm sort of ignoring the background. The background was just there for to help me get started. I don't always add the background in gouache either. Sometimes you can use, for example, marker, or some materials that are more waterproof as well can work really great for adding a background. Same if you work in color pencils, adding a background first makes a world of difference, because that background helps you get over that fear of the white page. It makes a huge difference. So I can see there's quite a few people watching at the moment, so let me know where you're from. If you put it in the chat, I'm really curious. And if you have any questions, let me know as well. Let me know if you're painting or drawing, or if you're working your sketchbook. So, and if you would like to join again next week, we're doing this every week for, I don't know, forever, but I'm planning to do this every week for a long time, and to do different sketchbook things every week. So it's always 3 o'clock UK time. So sometimes we'll work from a reference picture, and sometimes I'm just chatting to you the way I'm doing now about art and my art practices. So I'm using this quite dry. I'm trying to make this layer a little bit darker. So So it slowly is getting fuller and fuller. So doing an extra layer to make sure that this part of the picture is opaque. So I'm doing some stones here. Can you sort of start visualizing what it is that we're painting yet? Sometimes it takes a little bit of time. So I think most of you know that I run my creative community and that we paint in there as well. And then it's always a little bit more interactive. I love YouTube lives, but it's only it's a shame that I can't see any of you. So if you want to join one of my Zoom sessions, have a look at my community, and then you can join in and actually ask me questions in real life and show me your art. Even though I cannot see your art right now, I would still really love to see it, so make sure that you share it. If you share it on social media, to tag me in what it is that you're making. It gives me so much joy to see what everyone makes. So making this part here a bit darker. You can see that I have not taped my paper. The edges are just going to be a little bit sort of messy and loose. So, there we go. Shall I zoom in for a second to show you what it is that it looks like a little bit up close? So let me quickly do that. A little bit messy, a little bit loose, and very much in the middle of this painting session. So you can see the strokes of my brush is really clear. You can see the background is a little bit messy. These stones here at the front, I've only just outlined them. I need to give much more detail to them. I want to start adding lots more little plants here in the background. There we go. It starts to feel a little bit more like a forest, whilst when we first started it was just the green and blue background. So, quick sip of tea. Water, I keep saying tea, but it is not tea, of course. So, let me add a little bit more green to these stones. So I know that my colors are all quite close together. And there's benefits to that. And there's also things about this color scheme that are a bit difficult. And the benefit of this is that the colors will go together really well. If you work in a color scheme where the colors are all in the same side of the color wheel, like green and blue, the colors will naturally go well together, and you don't have to worry about like clashing colors or being too busy or too loud. it would just generally work really well. But the difficult thing about working in a color scheme like this is that it's hard to distinguish between different areas, or to to really create that clarity that you would otherwise get. So if I would add in something orange here, that would instantly jump out and be really clear. And that is a little bit harder to achieve when you work on the same color scheme. But that doesn't mean that it's impossible. I just need to make sure I add in enough contrast and some lights in here again at some point. It's just, these are the benefits of having a clear... Well, I think working in a color scheme is always a good idea, but working in a color scheme with colors that are so close together. So I'm not using any reds or, well, there's a bit of yellow in green, of course, but I'm not using any reds or yellows at the moment. I might add in a bit of yellow at some point, but for now I'm happy to stick with the colors that I have chosen, blues and greens. See, these rocks now start to feel a bit rounder by adding in some shadows and then some lighter sides. Slowly things start to look a little bit more the way I want them to look. It always takes time, there's no rush. You have to take your time for these things. So, if you've seen the video that I did last week or the week before, where we were sketching hands and feet, that's also a really good practice if you've not watched it yet. If you want to carry on sketching, I'd really recommend that one. So that's from reference photos and much more. Often, like, we're all drawing the same thing, sort of tutorial. So. Oh, that's a little bit light, isn't it? Maybe a little bit too light. Let me blend that out. So I wanted to add a little bit of a highlight on that side of the tree. But I think that is a little bit too much. So. You can carefully blend things out if you do it gently. It says that the health of my stream is a bit difficult, so hopefully you can watch everything okay. I'm not going to stop it now and restart it. I need to look into this to make sure that next time everything works okay. I hope you don't have too much delay or too many problems while watching this. So I'm just going to add in a little bit more detail here. Some plants and some ferns. So, when you create plants and textures, there's different types of brush strokes that you can use. So you might want to do a bit more of a tapping motion, or you might want to do something that's more strokes, or using the tip of your brush. There's different ways of doing things, and different type of strokes or movements with your wrist create different type of textures. So there we go. So I want this to be feeling a bit like bushy plants. There we go. I start to incorporate a little bit more black and white into my pictures. So the gouache that I'm using is actually from tubes, and I put them in that container myself. You can buy these gouaches that look a bit like sort of this format. They come like this. It's called gel gouache, like jelly gouache, because they look a little bit like jellies, like jam. But the I've never tried those. I've always only used the gouache in tubes. So I'm very much working on creating some textures now. Can't see that there's any questions yet, but if anyone has a question, make sure you ask away. So I was interviewed a few times recently about my art practice and about why I started making some musings and why I'm doing what I'm doing. And it's quite interesting to think about sort of your past and why you're doing things in a certain way, right? So I studied law originally. I did not study art. And I did apply to art school, and I don't know if I shared this here before. I know I've told people in lots of places, but I don't know if you know this. But so I studied law, but I applied to art school originally after high school. It was like a long time ago, and I got rejected from art school. And the course that I applied for at the time was fashion, and then I applied another time for graphic design. And both times I was told that what I was doing wasn't really suitable for that, for those courses, which I agree with in hindsight, but at the time it was very hard to hear. And they told me that I should do fine art instead. But I had this idea in my mind that fine art was something that you could never make a living out of, is what I thought. I thought there's no way you could make a living out of fine art and then just support yourself based on that. I had this idea that if you were a fine artist, you'd be the starving artist and you would never be able to make a living. And I never heard of illustration, and this is what I do most now, illustration. And it was just not something that I even saw as an option. I didn't know. And the strange thing is that I even knew someone who was a children's book illustrator, and I still did not realize that was something that I could do. So I put all my art materials away. I didn't make any art for years. Well, barely any art, because I studied law and I was lots of busy. And don't feel too bad for me, because I did lots of other fun things, and I had lots of experiences, and I traveled and did lots of other fun things, but I barely made any art. And then in 2018, I started to make a little bit more art again. And then my grandmother passed away, who I loved very much and I was very close to. And I took all her art materials home. She was an artist. So I took all her art materials home and started to paint with them. And it made me feel really close to her, which really helped with my grief and going through all these things. So that's sort of something that really helped me go through that really difficult period. And also I just really fell in love with art again. So I took all her art materials home, started to paint with them, really got so much joy out of it. And then someone I knew asked if I could, because they knew I painted sometimes, and asked if I could do the cover for a book, which I did, which actually turned out alright. It turned out really nice actually, but the fact that I just said yes and then made that after I hadn't painted at all for years and years is quite remarkable. And then I thought, maybe I could do this, maybe I can make a living out of this would be fun. And I started to run some art classes, and people I knew said, can you teach me this, and can I join these courses? So I started to teach more, and then in 2019, in the summer, I quit my job and started to do this full time. And that was before the pandemic. So everything I did was in person. All my classes were in person. So everything I did was in person. And then Corona happened and I had to bring everything online. And that went really well. Lots of people joined. I ran lots of art classes online, and that went much better than I could have ever had dreamed. And I'm still doing everything online. Sometimes I host some in-person groups or classes locally, but most of the time everything is online. So it's really strange how things happen sometimes. And sort of the circle is round, because now I make art full time, and I've never been to art school. So it's strange how sometimes your path takes you into different directions, isn't it? And it's not like I thought I wasn't creative or that I couldn't do it, but then once I got rejected from art school, I really felt so deflated, and I just thought, I'm clearly not good enough. What's the point of doing this? And I was really quite down because of it, and I didn't make any art for such a long time. So that's the sort of how it came to be. And I really believe that everyone is creative and everyone can paint, everyone can learn to paint. And I know that for some people it might come a little bit easier than for others, like any skill, but creativity is not a skill. We are all creative beings. Everyone, every human, we're all creative. Creativity is not a skill. Creativity is something that we all have, and you can nourish it and practice it and become not even better at it, but like tap into that a little bit easier. And painting and drawing are skills that you can practice and that you can learn. And just like any sports or there's lots of other activities that I think are skills that you can learn and you can become better at, and you can grow. So But creativity is something that we all have, even though a lot of people believe they are not creative. I think that's nonsense. We are all creative. That's what makes us human. The ability of writing stories and telling stories and painting and drawing and making things beautiful and knitting and decorating our house and cooking and making up when you make a plate, when you make it look really beautiful. And that's all creativity, all those things. Singing, music, dancing. There's so many different things that you can do that form, that are part of creativity. And just because you cannot draw doesn't mean you're not creative. That's something I feel really strongly about. So, and we keep learning our entire life. It's never too late to learn a new skill. And you don't have to do it professional for it to be valid. It's absolutely okay to do something just for fun. Yeah, for fun, for joy, for relaxation, for you can come up with 1,000 reasons why it's absolutely okay to do something. So you don't always have to become a professional for it to be valid, and you don't have to make money to be an artist. There's so many things that we tell ourselves and rules that we think that are in place that we've just that are nonsense, that we're just telling ourselves. So, it doesn't matter how old you are. Do you know Grandma Moses? In my Start Your First Sketchbook course, I did a module about her. Grandma Moses is this artist from the US, and she did not start painting until she was in her 70s. So she started painting for the first time when she was in her 70s, and she became super successful. Her paintings, they go for a lot of money nowadays. They are, so she became very successful. But she didn't start until she was 70, and she lived until her late 90s, I think, and made a very successful art career. And all started at such a later time in her life. And I think it's a perfect example that it's never too late to get started. If you want to do something, just go for it. You don't have. I'm not saying you have to quit your job and become a professional artist, but if you want to learn a new skill, there's definitely still time for it. Can you see my painting is coming together? Slowly and steadily. So, maybe there could be some mosses here as well. So, looking for some little sort of details that I can add in. So, and my mum, for example, I know my mum is not doing an artistic job. She retired recently, but she didn't start studying until she was in her 40s, and I think that she's brilliant. And I remember at the time when I was a kid, I thought, oh, you're really old. But she's not. She was only 40, and she went to university, and she studied, and she became a nurse, and then started to work as a nurse. I think that's a great example of starting something a little bit later, and then getting so much joy out of it, and working them for years after. I'm really glad that she did that. So I'm very proud of her as well. It's funny that as a kid you think 40 is old. I'm almost 40 now, but I don't feel old. So, adding in some more plants here. It actually goes quite fast, this painting, doesn't it? You can see it's sort of starting to come together and becoming more a bit more detailed. Whilst I'm chatting to you all, So I'm still adding in a few more plants here. Maybe a little bit of grey. Grey can be a great color to add into the mix. To tone things down a little bit and slightly less bright than white. So, what do you think? No one's asked me a question yet. If you do have any questions, make sure you ask away. So, I think I want to use a little bit more black here and there. So, cleaning my brush. Always make sure you clean your brush really properly. So I want this part here to be a little bit darker. So. Thank you. Is it Elinda? You've got a beautiful name. I am glad you're enjoying it. So, if you are painting along, make sure that you share your creations with me. It gives me I love seeing what people make. It's exactly the reason why I do what I do, and it gives me so much joy to see what people make. So. These branches are all a little bit empty of leaves, aren't they? I think I'll leave it like that. I don't think I'm going to add lots of leaves to them, just because it would change the vibe of the painting quite a lot. So I need a little bit more white. I'm going for quite a lot of white in this session. White is always one of the tubes that I need to buy most often. So, because I want to make some of these look a little bit more like mosses. So you can add this in little dots instead of perfect strokes. So, these trees that I inspired this by, I said this in the beginning of the class, I don't know if you all were here already, but this is inspired by a trip I went to Strathmore, to Devon, not so long ago. And the trees there are just so wonderful. They're so old and crackly, and there's so much moss everywhere, and the forests there's so much going on there, and I think it was just absolutely wonderful, and I really wanted to paint a forest like that. So I'm adding in some mosses here as well. This color looks really white in comparison to the dark colors, but it is actually a really light green. So adding a bit of that moss here. I am now working for my imagination. I have I had a reference photo on my phone. Yeah, I've got my phone just here. I had a reference photo there just for that I had a few glances at. But if I show you in a moment, it is not looking anything like that. I'm just using my imagination now. So maybe there could be some more grasses here. So I think I told you, but I have swapped to a slightly smaller brush than what I started with, because these strokes that I'm making now, they are much finer, and I want this to be a little bit more precise. I'm thinking of maybe adding in a little bit of a waterfall. Shall I try it? I need to use my paint fairly dry there. And then that's going to be here. How does that look? So this is a bit like dry brushing. It's a little bit tricky to do it here in the little nooks of the paper. Does that look a little bit like water? I think with a bit of... Once it's dry, I can add in a little bit more. I think it sort of does look a little bit like water. Just blending this out a little bit. So there we go. Now I want to add any darker marks here and there. Maybe a bit more black. So I'm using my paint sort of drier and drier to make more and more precise lines. For that background, that was really wet and really loose, but now for something that is a bit more precise, I'm using my paint much drier. So I have to concentrate for a moment. Some really fine lines there. And I think the last bit of the picture, I want to add in a little bit of mystique. A little bit more. So yes, I'm going to do this as a regular session. So if you enjoy this and you want to paint with me more often, then make sure you subscribe to my channel, because then you will get updates of when I'm going live. And you can also subscribe to my email list if you want, because I share when I go live on my email as well. So if you want to know when that is. make sure you do that. There we go. I think I'm going to start adding in a little bit of mystical sort of shapes. Some twinkles. So I'm going to use my white for that, just pure white this time. And I think here from the waterfall, no, actually here from this moss, I could start adding in some little white twinkles. Is that the right word? Bit of mystical. So this is just white gouache, some smaller and some larger, larger of these little dots. So. There we go, maybe a little bit more here. Oh, excuse me. You can see it always easiest on the slightly darker background. So, I do think that feels quite magical, doesn't it? I'm going to add in a little bit more. So, you know how they say less is more? I'm a bit of a maximalist. So. There we go. A little magical So I am tempted to also add in a little bit of color pencil here and there, but not today. Can always do that a little bit later. I'm a big fan of some mixed media magic. So. There we go. I'm going to let this dry for a moment, see what that feels like. What do you reckon? Is this the look we were going for today? You can see I've worked in a very limited color scheme, only blues and greens. So I've achieved that by adding in some black with my paint as well, and quite a bit of white for the lighter tones. So dark green, light green, blue, and then black and white. So I kept it really, really simple. I added a background first, which makes a big difference to the painting. If I started on a white paper and I had to do the background first, it'd be much harder. So sometimes it's nice to do the background, let it dry, and then paint over it once you're ready. So I think I'm going to let this dry, and then I might add in a bit more with color pencils to add in some finer details that are a bit hard to do with paint. But I really hope you enjoyed it, and I am going to run a session, well, not exactly like this, but at the same time again next week, 3 o'clock UK time. And every time I'm going to work in a sketchbook. So sometimes I will paint, sometimes I will doodle or draw something. This is a session from a few weeks ago where we were drawing in pen, human figures. This was another session where we were drawing feet, so that's a very different style. You can expect some of those as well. Sometimes I do loose ink sketches. So there is a time and a place for everything, and I love doing lots of different things. So if there's something in specific, like something in particular that you would like to practice, let me know, because I'm very happy to do something in ink or to draw from life or do some line and wash, practice sort of line and wash like this, do pen drawing. So I do lots of different things. So if there's something you want to practice, let me know, and otherwise I will just pick something myself like what I did today. So thank you so much for being here, and I really hope to see you again soon. And make sure you share your creations with me, because I love seeing them. Just tag me if you share them on social media as Makings and Musings, and then I know where to find them. So thank you so much, and I hope you have a really lovely rest of your day. Bye bye.